I'm now convinced that there's nobody that sits back and says I've 100% made it. Every dream is fulfilled, because I keep talking to people who I would assume that that is true for, and they tell me the reasons that it isn't.
Exactly.
And if you listen
Exactly.
to
There's
the
it's
catalog, esteemed audience, you can hear it as well. But 5 books in, you've been nominated for a number of awards. You've received all sorts of reader feedback. Surely there have been points along the way where you felt like, oh, I did do it. The dream did come true for me, right? You are Fleur Bradley, published middle grade author.
mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. It's people other people asking you to blurb their book or quote their book. That's sort of one of those where I'm like, oh, someone thinks that my name is worth something. So that was a cool experience. The kid fan mail still gets me every time, and that's a small level, but it's just really amazing when they draw a picture of your book and talk about how much they enjoyed it. I mean, you've really made an impression on a young person, which is what you're trying to do. There was one girl who dressed up as Penny. So, Midnight at the Barclay Hotel has 3 main characters, and one of them is Penny. And she dressed up as Penny for her dress up as your favorite book character day. And her mom sent me a picture, and it's just it's stuff like that. It's that you where you're just taking a moment, and it's like, yeah, things are going well for me in a way that I didn't know were going to. And just in general, like the buzz, when there's any sort of buzz or anybody talking about your book that I can't link back to me, and like it's not my cousin or my mom going, hey, look at this book, or a friend or whatever, or somebody who I emailed, or I don't know, some first level contact. It's a third level sort of connection who's talking about my book. Then it starts to feel like, oh yeah, I'm an author, because somebody is talking about the book without you making them. So that's a level of, I you do have to celebrate those milestones. During COVID in particular, I was so busy with all these school visits. I was writing my next book. That's when I wrote Daybreak on Raven Island. And it is my daughter. Both my daughters were living in the house with us because of circumstance, their college and all that stuff. So we were all in the same house, and they were great about celebrating every accomplishment. So every time there was something good happened, they were like, "Cake, let's get some cake." So it became sort of a joke in the house where we were like, "Do we have another reason to have cake?" And it got to the point where award nominations they kind of roll in the springtime and summertime. So it just kept coming and coming and coming for Midnight at the Barclay Hotel. And that was also a moment where I was like, I need to sit for a moment and kind of appreciate what's happening right now. There's a speech that Neil Gaiman did for some college, and he was talking about a moment where that he had sitting next to Stephen King, where he was signing books, and Stephen King told him that this is great, and he said, enjoy it. And Neil Gaiman said that he didn't because he was just so busy, with in the moment signing the books. And I'm trying to remind myself anytime something good happens to have cake, even if you're not having cake, you can have virtual cake, but sort of take a moment to go, I did that, whether it's even something that is not an external and not an author moment, but more of a writer moment where maybe you finished a chapter or you revised a difficult portion of your manuscript. It just, you have to celebrate the small stuff, the milestones, the moments that you have that are good, because it fuels you when it's hard.
I know you had I don't know. I don't know what the average author journey is between the newbie that's like, I wrote a book and then they suddenly offered me a movie deal. Like, oh, good for you. You're 19. Ah, fantastic. And then the person who's, 75, 76, been working their whole life and now finally their debut novel's coming out. There's a whole range. But I
Yes.
know that at one point you had 5 unsold manuscripts in a drawer. You had a couple of agents that represented some of those and you never got a contract. for that stress versus where you're at, wherever you are, happen to be momentarily, where you know that
Mm.
there's going to be more books, you know that you're probably going to receive some more feedback. That's got to be night and day, right, in terms of what stresses you out.
It is. It's. I will say though, there are no guarantees. There's no. I'm working on a manuscript now that's going to go on general submission. That means, it could possibly just stall out. It's entirely possible that what I'm working on right now does not get published. There are no guarantees. There really aren't. Even when you're at a level where I am, where you sort of looking back and going, hey, look at that. Those are all my books. It's a tough industry, and it doesn't work like that, unfortunately, where there is a moment where you can go, oh, you know what, my next book was probably gonna, get all this money, or I'll get another book contract. It's possible that this one stalls out. It does happen. So I try to remember that, and that I think it's a good motivator, because there are no guarantees. So that means that you do have to write the best book that you can at that very moment, and put your all into it every single time, because otherwise, you start phoning it in or assuming that something is guaranteed. I don't think you do your best work anymore. So I kind of embrace that part about publishing, is that there just aren't any guarantees, and who knows what will be next. I'm working on a YA manuscript as well, and that could go nowhere, or that could be a huge success. But what I can't control is how hard I work, and how how much I put into those manuscripts, and how much I make sure that it's a book that where I'm thinking, okay, that third grader, fourth grader I'm talking to today, they're going to want to read that book. And that's where your mind has to be at, because if you start to live in the bubble of thinking that everything is guaranteed, you don't do good work anymore.
That makes 100% sense to me. I think that's about the most positive way to look at it. I mean, that is the situation either way, so you might as well.
Exactly, you might as well embrace it. Yeah, why not? And you have to keep your sense of humor. Like you were saying, some people, it's easy to get bitter in this industry. And I've to put it into context, my very first book, Double Vision, came out just about 10 years to the day ago, and most of the people I debuted with are no longer doing this. So just to put that into context, they're not writing at all anymore. So that's how tough of a business it is. And also, it's about whether you hang on and you keep going. So you have to find a way to stay positive, to keep at it in an industry that is just extremely tough, and can be demoralizing if you get too caught up in that part of it, the business side of it. I think you do want to quit. There's better ways to make money, let's be real. So a lot of people, once they've had their book out, they can say, well, I did that, I don't want to deal with the industry anymore. Because I've sat with some fellow debut authors from that time, and a few of them were so bitter, where I thought to myself, I just don't ever want to be that. I don't ever want to be that angry with, you can be angry at the industry, but it isn't going to change. It's always going to get harder. It's so much harder even now than it was 10 years ago to get an agent, to find publication, to find a home at a publishing house, to get your book seen. It's that much harder now than it was 10 years ago. So you have to find a way. I mean, I get frustrated with the industry sometimes, but then I put that in a box and go, you know what? It's poison. It's poison to your soul, to your creative spirit, to your ability to promote your book. So I don't ever want to become that. So I work really hard to stay positive, for my own sake, really.
Thanks 100%. I do love the idea that Penguin and Random House will stop for a moment. They're like, wait, it should stop merging. We didn't know how upset we'd made you, poor author. Oh, we're gonna try this right now.
Yes.
Changing our practices. We apologize. Oh, they're there.
Yeah, no, does not work like that. So yes, you have to do what you can to make your end work and still be happy in it, because that's, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm living a dream if you think about it. So I'm trying to remember that whenever it gets hard and things are uncertain. Um, you know, that you're right, that this is, that it's fun. I mean, let's face it.
We could have been accountants.
Yes, I was an
Wasn't an option.
accountant. I kid you not. Before I became a writer.
In finance, I probably would have been an all right accountant.
Yeah.
But I've been around long enough that I've known people personally who've been critique partners and friends who have gone the very bitter route. I had somebody who was the most hardcore writer I'd ever know tell me that they felt like they'd been in an abusive relationship with publishing for a long time, and now they wanted to be free. And I could see that argument. I don't feel that way because I've, despite every last dream I ever had not coming 100% true, I keep talking to Fleur Bradley today. I'm having fun. I enjoy this. This is not a rational, reasonable thing I've decided to do with so much of my time. I could have spent more time financial advising. This is the thing I chose, and it is mostly a joy. But it does occur to me now and again that when you get to a point like you're at right now, where you have had objective success, despite whatever hardships that might have come along the way, you've had these experiences. You've had the photos from children dressed as your characters. I've got one of those too, and I keep it when I really need inspiration. I'll look at it and go, that's what we're doing this for. But it also occurs to me that you are an author. Nothing you do from this moment forward can take that away. You could become an author that nobody likes very much because of a terrible thing you did, but you would still be an author. And up to this moment, everything you've done having been a thing. So if you did find that you found something you loved almost as much as writing, or that brought you joy in another capacity, and maybe even a little bit more income stability, I don't necessarily know that that's a dark ending to a career, that you could just
and I don't. And those people who are no longer around writing, I can't blame them. Sometimes it's a choice you make where you're like your critique partner, where it's like, I don't want this anymore. You are choosing, when you are going into a traditional publishing sort of contract, you're partnering with the publisher. So you are your business entity, and you're partnering with them because they have the resources, the editors, the art department, the distribution, the way to get your book out there. And what it is that they do, or what they decide to do or not do, that you cannot control. But you can control what it is that you do and you put out there, and the effort that you make. When with each book, I sit down and I make a big marketing plan, and I have all bases covered, in a sense that if the publisher does absolutely nothing, I'm still okay, because I'm still doing all the things that I can do to get the book out there, and that I've learned over time work and don't work. And it's tough. Yes, and publishing is a strange industry, and we can talk, for another 3 hours about how weird some things are. But it's
better after we do.
But yeah, it is. You choose. You're right. You can choose not to do that. And there's a lot of people who are independently published. Back when I was first published, this was still very, sort of print in your garage thing to do. But these days, I sit next to independently published authors, self-published authors, whatever you want to call it, and they are doing the same thing I am. They're selling their books. So when I sit at a festival or something and I sit next to that person, they're promoting their books same way I'm promoting my books. So you can choose lots of different paths in publishing, and I think that's the part that is exciting now, is that you can do so much more to get your books out there, that paths that weren't available or that weren't as good of a path back even 10 years ago, and now you can. So you can choose to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I at one point might choose to independently publish something. I have no idea. It's I don't rule anything out at this point. It's tomorrow is a different day, next week is a different week. next year everything could be completely different. Publishing is weird like that, and you have to change with it, and you have to make your own choices based on it. So you can't be bitter about, when your publisher is doing XYZ or not doing XYZ. This is a partnership that you're choosing to enter into, and you can also not do that.
Something I'm hoping to see, and I think we are seeing it, and I hope it continues to become more widespread, is that independent publishing will put more pressure on traditional publishing to act right. Because you're not the only game in town, traditional publishing. There's all kinds of options. I can hire the cover designers for the best-selling books. I can hire the editors for the best book. And many of them have gone into freelance capacity because they're being passed from publishing house to publishing. The best people in the world are available on Fiverr right now. And so I would hope that will force traditional publishing to step up their game and justify, one, how much of the profit they're taking from the book, because you are giving up, well, not you personally, but traditionally, you are giving up a significant amount of royalty.
Yes.
The privilege of going with a traditional publisher. And so the question has to be, for all that I'm giving up, what am I getting in return? And then that equation, I assume, will continue to change over time. It has to be evaluated on a case by case. Having said that, all of your previous publishers, I'm sure, have been absolute perfection. This is just hypothetical.
You're right. You can make those choices. And I think as authors, particularly not debut authors, but authors that are more established, go on, they're going to have certain things where hopefully the agents will start to go, hey, you know what, this is not okay. Or I hope so. I hope we'll start to see that, given the amount of people that are writing and the fact that, publishers can pick and choose. I don't know. They're still in a very powerful position in the way that the system works. But I'm hoping that we'll start to see some changes. Also for the editors, there's been a lot of, shifting and people quitting because the conditions are just so tough. I mean, we're talking about it from an author's perspective, but the editors and the other people, like you mentioned, have gone freelance, some of them, because it is so tough. So hopefully we'll start seeing a bit of an improvement in conditions and the industry going forward. But we'll have to see. I like what I see from small presses. Some of the smaller presses are doing an excellent job getting their authors into promotional opportunities. The products are looking good, like the books themselves are looking good, whereas some time ago that was a bit iffy sometimes, where it also looked kind of like something that somebody printed off their printer. We're now seeing professional, like the small presses are able to put out stuff that competes significantly with the big dogs, so to speak. So I'm excited to see that for my author friends, and I'm excited to see that for publishing in general, just to kind of see where that goes, because they're, sometimes the status quo is so used to being a certain way. Some of the smaller publishers houses can kind of shake things up, I think, right now.
Does drive me nuts, without calling out anyone specifically, when I see a big five or big four, however many there are when you're listening to the esteemed audience, or even when I see a small indie press and the cover is hideous. Like, what are you doing? I could go get a pre-made cover for $15 right now that looks better than that.
Yeah.